Imagine this situation. You've been shot down over enemy territory. Your right arm is broken in 3 places. Your left knee is badly sprained. You're immediately captured and brutally tortured for 5 days. Then you escape. Barefoot, with no food, broken bones, you walk for over 12 days through enemy territory. You swim across a river. You make it within 2 miles of an American base. And then, just before dawn, just before rescue, you're recaptured and shot. What would you do in this situation? Well, one American Air Force pilot found himself in exactly this position on August 26, 1967, and what happened next was so extraordinary that he would spend the next 67 months as a prisoner of war. He endured years of torture, starvation, and isolation, yet he never broke. He became the only person in history to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Air Force Cross. He's considered the most decorated U.S. military officer since General Douglas MacArthur, with over 70 awards and decorations. This is the story of Colonel George Everett Bud Day, the man who fought in 3 wars and survived 67 months in hell. So let's begin. First, let's understand the background. George Everett Day, known as Bud, was born on February 24, 1925, in Sioux City, Iowa. Bud Day's military career is remarkable because he served in not 1, not 2, but 3 major American wars. Let me repeat that: World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Very few American servicemen can claim combat experience spanning 3 separate conflicts. In 1942, when Bud was just 17 years old, he made a bold decision. He dropped out of Central High School and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. This was during World War II. Bud served for 30 months in the North Pacific with the 3rd Defense Battalion on Johnston Island. He was part of a 5-inch gun battery. However, despite being stationed in the Pacific Theater, Bud never saw actual combat during World War II. He was discharged on November 24, 1945. But Bud Day wasn't finished with military service, friends. On December 11, 1946, he joined the Army Reserve, serving until December 10, 1949. During this time, Bud took advantage of the GI Bill. He attended Morningside College and earned a Bachelor of Science degree. Then he went to law school at the University of South Dakota School of Law, receiving his Juris Doctor degree. He passed the bar exam in 1949 and was admitted to practice law in South Dakota. Think about this for a moment. Bud Day was a lawyer with a promising civilian career ahead of him, but he chose to continue serving his country. On May 17, 1950, Bud received a direct commission as a 2nd lieutenant in the Iowa Air National Guard. Then, on March 15, 1951, he was called to active duty for undergraduate pilot training in the U.S. Air Force. He was awarded his pilot wings at Webb Air Force Base, Texas, in September 1952. From February 1953 to August 1955, during the Korean War, Bud served 2 tours as a fighter bomber pilot. He flew the Republic F-84 Thunderjet in the 559th Strategic Fighter Squadron. By this time, Bud had decided to make the Air Force his career. Now here's an incredible detail about Bud Day's life. In 1957, while stationed at Royal Air Force Wethersfield in the United Kingdom, Bud was forced to bail out when his jet fighter caught fire. His parachute canopy failed to open properly. Friends, let me be clear about what this means. His parachute failed. According to Bud, a 30-foot pine tree cushioned his fall and saved his life. He became the first person known to survive such an event, ejecting from a jet fighter with a failed parachute. Most people don't survive this kind of accident, but Bud Day walked away. This should have been the first indication that this man was something else after his F-100 Super Sabre training. Bud served as assistant professor of aerospace science at St. Louis University from June 1959 to August 1963. By 1967, Bud was now a major with more than 5,000 flying hours, with 4,500 of them in fighter aircraft. He was anticipating retirement in 1968, but then he made a fateful decision. Despite being eligible for retirement, despite having served in 2 wars already, Bud volunteered for a tour in South Vietnam. He was assigned to the 31st Tactical Fighter Wing at Tuy Hoa Air Base in April 1967. On June 25, 1967, Major Day was made the first commander of a highly classified and dangerous unit. The unit was Detachment 1, 416th Tactical Fighter Squadron, operating under the project name Commando Sabre. The mission was to evaluate twin-seat F-100F aircraft as fast-forward air controllers, or fast FACs, in high-threat areas over Laos and North Vietnam. Using the call sign Misty, named after Bud's favorite song, his detachment had 4 two-seat F-100Fs and 16 pilots. All Misty FAC crews were volunteers who had at least 100 combat missions in Vietnam and a minimum of 1,000 flight hours. This was one of the most dangerous jobs in the Vietnam War. Tours in Commando Sabre were temporary and normally limited to 4 months or about 60 missions. Now we come to August 26, 1967, the day that changed Bud Day's life forever. Major Day was flying F-100F aircraft with call sign Misty 01. This was his 26th fast FAC sortie. He was directing a flight of F-105 Thunder Chiefs in an airstrike against a surface-to-air missile site north of Thon Cam Son and west of Jong Hoi, 20 miles north of the DMZ in North Vietnam. This was Day's 65th mission into North Vietnam. He was acting as check pilot for Captain Corwin M. Kip Kippenhan, who was upgrading to aircraft commander. Suddenly, 37mm anti-aircraft fire struck the aircraft. The F-100 was crippled. Day and Kippenhan had no choice. They had to eject. And friends, here's where Bud Day's nightmare began. As Major Day ejected from the aircraft, his body slammed violently into the side of the cockpit. The impact broke his right arm in 3 places. He also suffered eye injuries and back injuries. His left knee was badly sprained. Despite these severe injuries, Day's parachute opened. Unlike his previous ejection years earlier, Captain Kippenhan was lucky. He was quickly rescued by a USAF HH-3E rescue helicopter. But Major Day was unable to contact the rescue helicopter by survival radio. As he landed on the ground in North Vietnam, local militia were waiting for him. He was immediately captured. And then the torture began. For the next 2 days, Bud Day was severely beaten. According to his later accounts, he was hung upside down with ropes during most of this torture. Think about this, friends. A man with a right arm broken in 3 places, a badly sprained knee, eye injuries and back injuries, being hung upside down and beaten for 2 days. Finally, an enemy medic crudely set his broken arm without proper medical equipment or anesthesia. The torture let up slightly after this. Bud Day's injuries were so severe and his left knee was so swollen that his North Vietnamese captors considered him incapable of resistance or escape. They held him in a damp cave and only loosely bound him. This was their fatal mistake. On the 6th night of his captivity, his 5th night as a prisoner, Bud Day escaped. Think about this decision, friends. Bud had a broken arm in 3 places. His knee was severely sprained. He had no boots. His captors had stripped him of both his boots and flight suit. He was barefoot. He was in enemy territory, 20 miles north of the DMZ, and yet he decided to escape. Barefoot and severely injured, Bud Day began traveling south. For 2 days, both of his feet were repeatedly cut by sharp rocks and battle debris scattered throughout the jungle. Later he would recount hearing the sounds of his pursuers and their dogs all around him, day and night. But through sheer willpower and an incredible will to survive, he managed to stay 1 step ahead of them. On his 2nd night of freedom, unable to continue without rest, the 41-year-old pilot sought refuge under a bush to sleep. His fitful sleep was suddenly shattered by a massive explosion. A rocket or bomb, he never knew which, detonated so close to him that it threw his body into the air. The explosion ruptured his eardrums and sinuses. Shrapnel ripped into his right leg, cutting large, open wounds. Bud began vomiting blood. He was disoriented and had lost his equilibrium. For 2 more days, Bud languished in the brush, Barely conscious, then he resumed his trek south. Most people would have given up at this point. Broken arm in 3 places, sprained knee, feet cut and bleeding, fresh shrapnel wounds in his leg, ruptured eardrums, no boots, no food, no water. But Bud Day continued. For several days, his only food consisted of a few berries and 2 frogs that he swallowed alive. This meager sustenance provided just enough energy to continue. After more than a week of struggle through the Vietnamese jungle, Day finally reached the Ben Hai River, which marked the boundary of the demilitarized zone. During the day, Bud hid from enemy patrols. At night, he left the cover of the jungle. He found a bamboo log and used it as a float to swim across the river into no man's land, the DMZ between North and South Vietnam. Bud Day had crossed from North Vietnam into the DMZ. Freedom was within reach. For another week, possibly more, Bud continued south through the DMZ. He avoided enemy patrols. Several times, he came heartbreakingly close to attracting the attention of American helicopters and reconnaissance airplanes. But each time, the aircraft flew away without seeing him. Still, with unbelievable strength of character, he continued south, hoping to reach an American patrol. Between his 12th to 15th day of escape, Bud began to hear the nearby sounds of American artillery and helicopters. During the darkness of night, he continued walking until he could actually see an American firebase. This base was Con Thien, a U.S. Marine firebase. Bud Day was within 2 miles, just 2 miles, of safety and rescue. But friends, Bud didn't want to approach the American base during the night because the defenders might mistake him for an enemy soldier and shoot him. So he made a decision that must have been agonizing. He lay down in the jungle to wait for dawn. Just a few more hours, and he would be rescued. Shortly before the sun rose, Bud Day looked up and saw a North Vietnamese soldier pointing an AK-47 rifle directly at him. Despite having no strength left, despite being within sight of rescue, Bud attempted to escape one final time. The North Vietnamese soldier opened fire. Bud was shot in his left hand and left thigh. After 12 to 15 days of freedom, after traveling over 25 miles barefoot through enemy territory with broken bones and shrapnel wounds, after swimming across a river, after coming within 2 miles of rescue, Bud Day was recaptured. A day and a half later, he was returned to his original prison camp. Now, friends, most prisoners who escape and are recaptured face severe punishment. But what happened to Bud Day was beyond severe. It was barbaric. Bud refused medical treatment for his new gunshot wounds. The wounds festered and became infected. His North Vietnamese captors tortured him for 48 continuous hours without rest. They wanted to break him. They wanted information. During the torture, they broke his right arm again, the same arm that had been broken in 3 places during ejection. Eventually, Bud appeared so broken on the outside that the enemy believed they had won. He answered their questions. What they didn't realize was that every important answer Bud gave them was false information, despite appearing completely destroyed physically. Bud Day had not broken mentally. 2 months later, in late 1967, Bud Day, totally debilitated physically and unable to perform even the simplest task for himself, was transferred to Hanoi. He was taken to the infamous Hoa Lo prison, known to American POWs as the Hanoi Hilton. This would be Bud's home for the next 5 years. In December 1967, Bud was placed in a cell with another American prisoner. This prisoner was Navy Lieutenant Commander John McCain, who would later become a U.S. Senator and presidential candidate. Both men were in terrible physical condition. Air Force Major Norris Overley nursed both back to health. Later, McCain devised a makeshift splint made of bamboo and rags that helped heal Bud's seriously atrophied arm. Friends, conditions at the Hanoi Hilton were barbaric. American prisoners faced isolation, humiliation, starvation, and torture that lasted year after year. Bud was periodically beaten, starved, and tortured. His weight dropped dramatically. His many injuries did not heal properly. But Bud Day continued to offer maximum resistance. He never truly broke. In February 1971, more than 3 years into his imprisonment at the Hanoi Hilton, something extraordinary happened. Several American prisoners gathered for a forbidden religious service. Suddenly they were interrupted by enraged enemy guards. The guards burst into the room with rifles pointed at the prisoners, and then one of the Americans stood to his feet. Ragged, battered, but unbroken, it was George "Bud" Day. Looking directly into the muzzles of the enemy rifles, Bud began to sing. The song was the Star-Spangled Banner, the American national anthem. Next to him, Commander James Bond Stockdale, the ranking American officer in the prison, stood and joined his voice to Bud's anthem of freedom. Soon, the other prisoners in the room joined the refrain, and then, from throughout the entire prison camp, came the sounds of other American POWs singing the national anthem. Stockdale, who would later receive the Medal of Honor himself, wrote that although he was punished for the episode, it was exhilarating. Our minds were now free, and we knew it. Friends, this moment encapsulates who Bud Day was. A man who had been tortured for years, whose body was broken, who faced enemy rifles, still had the courage to stand and sing his nation's anthem in defiance. This is the true meaning of unbreakable spirit. On March 14, 1973, after 5 years and 7 months as a North Vietnamese prisoner, a total of 67 months, or 2,028 days, Bud Day was finally released. Within 3 days, he was reunited with his wife, Doris Sorensen Day, and their 4 children at March Air Force Base, California. The reunion must have been emotional beyond words. On March 4, 1976, President Gerald Ford personally awarded Bud Day the Medal of Honor for his personal bravery while a captive in North Vietnam. But that's not all, friends. Bud Day also received the Air Force Cross for his continued resistance and heroism during a particularly brutal period from July to October 1969. He is the only person in history to have been awarded both the Medal of Honor and the Air Force Cross. This is an unprecedented achievement. While Bud was a prisoner, the Air Force had promoted him to lieutenant colonel and then to full colonel. After his release, despite being initially too weak to resume operational flying, Bud spent a year in physical rehabilitation. With 13 separate medical waivers, he was returned to active flying status. He underwent conversion training to the F-4 Phantom II and was appointed Vice Commander of the 33rd Tactical Fighter Wing at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. After being passed over for promotion to Brigadier General, Bud retired from active duty in 1977. At retirement, he had nearly 8,000 total flying hours. He returned to practicing law in Florida. In 1949, he had married Doris. Together they had 4 children and eventually 14 grandchildren. But friends, the story doesn't end there. In 2018, 5 years after Bud's death, something remarkable happened. The 2017 National Defense Authorization Act directed that Colonel George E. Bud Day be posthumously advanced to the rank of Brigadier General. On June 8, 2018, during a ceremony at the Air Force Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, presided over by Air Force Chief of Staff General David L. Goldfein, Bud Day was officially promoted to Brigadier General. His widow, Doris Day, attended the ceremony. The posthumous advancement was introduced by Bud's former cellmate, Senator John McCain. George Bud Day died on July 27, 2013, surrounded by family at his home in Shalimar, Florida. He was 88 years old. He was buried on August 1st at Barrancas National Cemetery at Nass, Pensacola. Florida John McCain said on Bud's death that he was the bravest man I ever knew, and his fierce resistance and resolute leadership set the example for us in prison of how to return home with honor. With over 70 awards, decorations, and medals, Bud Day is considered the most decorated United States military officer since General Douglas MacArthur. His decorations include the Medal of Honor, Air Force Cross, Air Force Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star, Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters and dozens of other honors. So friends, what can we learn from George Bud Day's story? First, the power of perseverance against impossible odds. Bud escaped with broken bones, no boots, no food, and traveled over 25 miles through enemy territory. Even when recaptured and tortured, he never truly broke. Second, courage under extreme duress. Standing in a prison camp, facing enemy rifles, and singing the national anthem shows a level of courage most of us cannot imagine. Third, that service to one's country can span a lifetime. Bud served in 3 wars over 3 decades. Fourth, that the human spirit properly steeled is truly unbreakable. Despite 67 months of torture, isolation, and starvation, Bud Day survived and returned home with honor. In 2008, Bud said of his imprisonment, "As awful as it sounds, no one could say we did not do well. Being a prisoner of war, it was a major issue in my life, and one that I'm extremely proud of. I was just living day to day. One bad cold and I would have been dead." This is the story of Brigadier General George E. Bud Day, the man who fought in 3 wars, the man who survived 67 months in hell, the most decorated U.S. military officer since Douglas MacArthur. Thank you for watching, friends. If you found this story interesting and educational, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more such content. And don't forget to tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it? I'll see you in the next video.